Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. In this week's Torah portion, the opening words are Eila Toldot Noach. These are the offspring, the children of Noach. And it begins to describe Noach's family. But there's something fascinating about the word Toldot. In Hebrew, the word Toldot means children or generations. But believe it or not, in Hebrew, the word Toldot means history. For example, in last week's Torah portion, Bereshit, it said, Eila Toldot Hashemayim Va'aretz Bihibaram. This is the history of the creation of the heaven and earth when God created it. And the same word that means future generations, offspring, children, simultaneously means the history, the past. And perhaps there's a very profound lesson being taught to us. You see, we think of history as something that lives in the past, bygone. But the Torah is telling us is that what history is really about is the offspring that it generates. History is about the lessons that we learn from it and how it changes us for the future. We only study history in order to be able to then live forward. And therefore, Toldot means future generations. But that's a result of Toldot, the past. We can only go forward because we have a past. And we have to take our past into our future. We are living through history right now. This chapter of Jewish history will be remembered and studied and commemorated for generations and generations. And we're living through history. But we have to remember it's not just about living through something that is passively going through us, but we have to actively take these experiences, as sad and as tragic as they are, and make sure they change us for the better. So we produce offspring, spiritual offspring, good deeds, that we become a greater and better nation as a result of the experiences we're going through right now. And yes, there's so many generations, offspring that have come as a result of October 7th. The most obvious one is the unity and the love of the Jewish people. But we've also become a more compassionate, more loving, sensitive people, not just towards one another, but more compassionate and more loving towards all of the Jewish nation, and by extension, all of humanity. One of the hostages that was abducted on October 7th was a 9-year-old girl. Her name is Emily Hand. I'll never forget seeing her father, Thomas Hand, weeping on TV about his daughter's abduction. And I remember him saying, I hope she's not alive, because I'd rather she suffer a quick death than suffer in the hands of Hamas. Miraculously, she survived. And in the exchange in December, she was freed by Israel and brought back home to her father. Who could forget the reunion of Thomas Hand and his daughter Emily? But Emily's older sister, Natalie, related something fascinating. That every time she would sit down at a meal, after she was released, before she would eat, she would look around the table and say, is anyone hungry here? And she would start sharing her food with people around the table. And they asked her, why do you do this? And she said, because when I was in captivity for 49 days, we were together with some adults, Israeli adults who were abducted with us. And when they served us something to eat, whatever it was, maybe a little pita and a little dip or some kind of beer necessities, the adults would look at the children in captivity in the tunnels in Gaza and say to the children, are you hungry? And start sharing their food. And so for 49 days she witnessed this, she observed this, and now this became her practice every time she sat down to eat a meal. Imagine that even in the darkest place on earth, as a hostage in Gaza, the adults showed this child and taught this child love, compassion, caring for others. And now this girl who emerged from the darkest chapter of the history of her life, being a hostage in Gaza at 9 years old, didn't just look at it something in the past, but took it into her future and learned to always share her food with others before she ate herself. We are becoming a greater nation as individuals and collectively. And the history of the Jewish people is what shapes and defines us, and that is what makes us who we are. Toldot means the past, and at the same time it's the future. We can't just remember the past, we have to make sure the past lives through us. The Jewish people don't live in the past, but the past lives inside of us. Have a wonderful day.